first important thing or the points to be emphasized is that you have to have digitization across the value chain. The second is that the team has to be enabled with the various digital tools so that they can work, they can exercise the work in that manner. The third thing is partner relationships. So, in supply chain, you have vendors on one side, you would have your stockists, dealers on the other side. So you need to have a continuous engagement with them, despite the various measures that the government announces that you cannot move around, etc. So you need to engage with them on digital platforms like Zoom or Teams, etc. And you have to frequently engage with them.
Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a vodcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you're new to our channel, please consider subscribing to it and hit the bell icon so that you never miss an update. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and I'm privileged to welcome a very senior supply chain leader from Mumbai, India, Pankaj Bhargava. Pankaj, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ashutosh.
Pankaj is the President Procurement for Pidilite Industries Limited, and he has led several businesses in supply chain, IT, and retail. Pankaj, as I had mentioned to you, that this episode or this our conversation today will focus on supply chain, because I believe that supply chain has not got the importance it deserves in the corporate sector. So I'm going to ask you lots of questions on supply chain, but let's start with saying that what do you think are some of the key supply chain challenges in our country?
Yeah, Ashutosh, supply chain challenges emanate from basically three factors, and this is across industry or across geographies. It's the variability or disruption of whether it is demand, supply, or the ecosystem. So all this has been very sort of come into the fore in a sense or highlighted in the last 1 year or so. And if you look at the kind of variability, disruption, demand, so just to take you back in the last 1 year, there was demand destruction that happened with a total lockdown. Then there was a demand bounce back, and the volatility still continues because you are moving in and out. So it's just amplified by that. The second thing is that the supply systems also try to match up demand and that volatility. So it has its own challenges there. And if we look at the kind of ecosystem, the ecosystem is impacted by this variability or disruption. And it is also impacted by various geographical challenges and variables. So basically, these are the various challenges that any supply chain faces.
Okay.
It has been more amplified in the last 1 year or so.
I agree. And therefore, let's talk about how has the pandemic affected supply chains, and what are supply chain leaders doing to counter the challenges the pandemic has given to them?
So, the supply chains have become more uncertain and volatile. So if let me give you a background here, Ashutosh. So if we look back at the last year, and if we look at the various sequence of activities that happened when the pandemic unfolded, so it was first China, where the pandemic was declared and the whole lockdowns happened. Then Europe, and so on and so forth on various countries. Then in India also a lockdown was announced, and it had a full stop on manufacturing. It has never happened. Manufacturing and logistics never stop. But this was a time when everything got stopped. The other thing that happened was that the west to east traffic, because China got shut, Europe got shut, people were not willing to have the shipping, lines were not operating between these two. So the whole shipping ecosystem went for a toss.
Okay.
And today also that availability is a challenge, even today after 1 year or so.
Wow.
Then material availability became a challenge, because of closures, shipping issues. So you easily, for imports, your cycle time went up by 15 to 30 days, easily. Then a labor crisis happened. The whole migrant crisis in India unfolded. The industries could not find labor. Then when the petrol and diesel was, very, the consumption was very less. The whole petrochemical supply chains were impacted.
Wow.
And it resulted, in raw materials not available for various industries. Then, so this happened. This is the impact of the kind of lockdown. But when lockdown was lifted, there was a ferocious recovery. China just galloped. Then India's economy recovery was also very sharp. So, this is just a background of what kind of volatility and uncertainty that was there in the last 1 year. And so basically what supply chains are doing now and what supply chain managers are doing is basically they are looking at these learnings and how do they manage these uncertainty and volatility. So basically two aspects, I would say. One is resilience that people are working on, and second is a concept called revenue assurance, because you have to work in a manner so that revenue does not get impacted. So these are two key things, initiatives that people are taking based on the learnings of the past.
Fascinating. And one of the things that I have learned in all my conversations is that when I started work in ITC in 79-80, we used to have a purchase manager who was a cost center. Today, the supply chain head is a profit center and probably contributes a significant amount of profit to the bottom line of the company. What has changed in the profile of a supply chain leader?
So the supply chain manager is now an integral part of the whole value chain, if I can call that.
Correct.
So the value chain, if we look at the various aspects of value chain, one is the profitability. So if you're procuring something, then even before that, whether you are assuring the revenue, so whether you are getting the material, if I specifically speak about procurement, whether you are getting the material on time so that there is no loss in sales. So that is the first aspect. So you become like an integral part of the whole value chain. The second aspect is at what cost are you getting this material? That's from an input perspective. The second aspect of servicing the supply chain for the end customer, Ashutosh, is basically how are you getting the material out and in what manner, and whether you are getting it at the right time. So actually the supply chain has evolved now to an extent where, you don't look at costs per se, or as you rightly mentioned, a cost center per se. You are actually contributing to the revenue.
Correct.
Even by getting the material. Profitability is a secondary aspect, or the second aspect, I would say. So the first part is that you have to get the supply chain right so that you get your input material on time, so that the revenue is not impacted and you service your customers. The second part is about the costs of doing that business and whether you are getting optimal costs in doing all this.
Fascinating. And again, a new learning for all of us around the world because of the pandemic is work from home. And work from home has started to result in very different demands you and I as customers want from our brands. Now, if you were to wear your supply chain hat, how are you rethinking your strategy to support demands in everyone's home?
So, if we look at work from home, so let me answer this into two parts.
Okay.
See, first is that how work from home is impacting the overall working of supply chain.
Sure.
And the second part would be about customer service. I think the first part is, which has, put into fore, is the kind of digitization that you need to have. So you are, so if you look at parts of supply chain, there are parts of supply chain like manufacturing or logistics where people would have to travel to their work locations, and which is again, one has to do it in a very safe manner. But the other parts can work from home. So how do these people work from home? First important thing the points to be emphasized is that you have to have digitization across the value chain. The second is that the team has to be enabled with the various digital tools so that they can work, they can exercise the work in that manner. The third thing is partner relationships. So, in supply chain, you have vendors on one side, you would have your stockists, dealers on the other side. So you need to have a continuous engagement with them, despite the various measures that the government announces that you cannot move around, etc. So you need to engage with them on digital platforms like Zoom or Teams, etc. And you have to frequently engage with them. So another aspect which is which has impacted is the whole thinking around inventory. So the JIT concept has to be rethought. The whole just-in-time inventory concept, even auto majors are now looking at stocking up in terms of building inventories, because the just-in-time aspect cannot just work. The other thing which is, which will lead to this is that a lot of this kind of working would lead to a lot of technology innovations that will happen for future, because all these challenges are coming up.
Very fascinating.
So this is Ashutosh, a part where how supply chain is coping up with the work from home. I think on the customer side, there are two aspects. One is that on the external side, that how do you take product to various channels? So we have heard about omni-channel commerce, but now organizations are moving rapidly to get their products on e-commerce platform. And that sales is also picking up in a sense, because there is no other, the other channels are closed, or they are partly working, or they work, 2 days a week or so. So one is a move towards e-commerce that's happening. The second thing is that how do you enable this e-commerce shift? So there also you need to have various technologies which help you to sort of execute this omni-channel commerce.
Very interesting. So, your comment now gives me a segue to my next question, which is on technology. You just spoke about technology. How is technology changing supply chains, and how do you think artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, drones, how are they going to change the way you will do your work?
Very interesting question, Ashutosh. And I'm a little passionate about technology, so I'll just elaborate in a little more detail.
Please. Yeah. Yes, please.
So basically, technology impact on supply chain, I would say, are threefold. First is that it improves efficiency. For example, you might have robotics, robots working in the warehouse, where your cycle time is getting compressed. So this is one example of improvement in efficiency. It improves effectiveness. Your accuracy level go up when your picking happens through RFID or through wearables, or you have robotic process automation where your accuracy levels of transactions goes up. And the third important aspect is that it is enabling innovations for competitive advantage. And the biggest example of competitive advantage is the example of Amazon. And whatever we thought 5 years back, 6 years back that this is going to happen is actually operational. Correct. In Amazon, and it's at cutting edge of technologies. It's bringing innovation. And you would, when you look at competitive advantage, you would look at areas like use of robotics or artificial intelligence to automate labor intensive jobs, to increase throughput from the same kind of infrastructure. The second aspect of enabling innovations would be predictive analytics, where improve demand forecasting. You can the whole volatility piece can be better managed. Your asset utilizations would go up. You are able to provide customer convenience in a highly effective manner. Then another competitive advantage area where a new technology is coming up is the whole area of blockchain, where especially in the food industry, you can do track and trace in a very stable manner. Yep. So it's still in the pilots, but I believe it's where a lot of innovation would happen.
Mm.
So this is how, and I would reiterate these three things. One is improvement in efficiency, improvement in effectiveness, and the whole area of competitive advantage.
Very
Now,
interesting.
coming to your specific questions on how AI, ML, robotics would help.
Mhm.
So the whole supply chain is moving towards, Ashutosh, a self-regulating kind of piece where manual intervention would be very less.
Okay.
And if you look at what cutting-edge companies like Amazon are doing, you would find that in their warehouses they would have an army of robots working. You would have drone deliveries, etc. So it is less manpower intensive, but highly self-regulating utility, which is smoothly run over various ecosystems.
Okay.
And if you look at various technologies like AI, ML, one, as I spoke, is an area of predictive analytics, where it makes you more proactive in network management, or manufacturing, or even ordering, or the logistics planning. Whether you want to plan any shipping or trucks, you are doing it in a very highly proactive manner. The second area on AI is about chatbots, where your customer service becomes more more customer oriented in a sense. In procurement, with the kind of AI applications, you are able to find the right fit of suppliers. The whole area of text analytics, where you're able to derive insights. So when I said that the whole utility of supply chain is becoming self-regulating, self-working, a lot of these insights that are coming from data help in doing this, and where AI and ML come in. You can do the price planning based on demand variations. You can do inventory planning based on the various future outlook. So this was about AI, ML.
Okay.
And if you asked about robotics and drones.
Yeah.
So, and as I mentioned, there are hundreds of robots working in Amazon warehouses. And basically, when you do robots sort of planning, it is basically for delivery of inventory across the warehouse, where they are equipped with maps, etc. So they'll move on their own. They would, when I started my career, there was a warehouse where there was a yellow slip, and there used to be, ins and outs. So, those ages have gone.
Yeah.
So, the robo would move. It will place the material at the right place. The drones would be used, say, in a warehouse for inventory stock taking. You would also use it for delivery, not in India right now, but abroad it's becoming fashionable. So, all these areas are getting impacted through technology. So you are seeing a very, very different supply chain.
Fascinating. So, let me just come back again to what we spoke about. I want to say suppliers like China.
Yeah.
For the last 20 odd years, Indian manufacturers have started to depend increasingly on China. But in a world that seems to be, getting its border walls up again from a globalized world, how do supply chain leaders readjust their strategy and look for more procurement from within their own country?
Yeah. So, Ashutosh, that is a challenge. So we have been living in a globalized world.
Yeah.
And, everybody was focused on cost optimization, cost savings, and you could move across the world to the best supplier. And to talk about China, China is a manufacturing powerhouse. You cannot, in my view, you cannot just ignore China. And even if there is a lot of talk of, moving production out of China or moving supply chains out of China, it will take a while. Even if somebody thinks today, it will take 6-7 years.
Correct.
Because that's the kind of capacities that they've built. And their major exports are to Europe and US. So, but coming back to your question, that how does one deal with it? So it's not only a China specific thing, it's the whole thought process around geographical risks.
Right.
So even if, and I gave you the example of when lockdowns happened, the lockdowns first happened, in China, and then it went to Europe. So Europe as a block was also, you could not get material out of there. So what supply chain managers are doing today is that they're mapping the various geographical risks. They are looking at specifically if there is a single source import only material, right? Then you do an assessment and you develop alternate sources, whether you develop that alternate source, say in a different geography in the world. Suppose something is getting supplied from China, can you get an alternate source from say Europe or US, or you develop a source in India. So that's the kind of strategies that people are deploying. Now, what it would do is that it might impact your costs because you went to the best cost supplier across the world. So it might impact your costs, but again, to re-emphasize resilience, you might have to do it. You might have to set up some share of businesses so that you procure across all the geographies. And from an India perspective, India vendor development, you take up it as a project and you develop the vendors slowly over a period of time.
Very interesting. So Pankaj, I'm now down to my last question for you. And this is a question for the thousands of people who will listen to our conversation. What would your advice be to a young individual who's starting off on her or his career in the corporate world in the supply chain?
So, Ashutosh, my advice here would be that if somebody is entering today, this is the best time to enter because it's a great learning time. Because the best learning time for supply chain professionals is basically when there is volatility and uncertainty. So the learnings have to be taken from the various scenarios that are happening across the world. And generally, the professional advice would be that you sort of have a learning mindset. Whatever is being practiced or whatever is happening, you take insights from it. And the other advice that I have, Ashutosh, is that basically you need to have some insights into the technology and how technology works, how technology helps in supply chain, because you can become a great supply chain manager if you know something about technology and how it can impact supply chain, because these two are intermingled and there is a tremendous impact of technology on supply chain.
How fascinating. Pankaj, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure and privilege speaking to you. Thank you for the incredible journey you have taken me on supply chains. To me, it was huge learning, but I know very little. But thank you again and good luck.
Thank you, Ashutosh, for this opportunity. I think, I hope it was useful.
It is.
And thanks once again.
Thank you.
Supply Chain Labs was founded in 2019 by investment firm Loomis Partners to identify, collaborate, and invest in 50 of the best supply chain startups over a 5-year discovery period. Supply chain is one of the most core areas for any segment of the economy, and even more so in a large and growing country like India, which needs deep innovation to help bridge the gaps in the physical supply chain, currently amplified even more so with COVID. In a short time frame of 2 years, Supply Chain Labs is already known as India's first and most widely recognized supply chain focused fund and fellowship. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.